Women's Liberation, the Marxist Tradition, by Sharon Smith. Section: The Self-Organization of Socialist Women. Engels encouraged German socialist August Bebel, who had authored Woman and Socialism in 1878, to assist with the founding of a socialist working women's movement within the Social Democratic Party of Germany, SDP. The result was the formation of a women-led party bureau in 1891, with Clara Zetkin, a leading member of the SPD, at its political and organizational center. Zetkin led this work until the Second International split over support for World War I, when she left to join a small number of other anti-war revolutionaries, including members of the Russian Bolshevik Party, to found a principled internationalist socialist movement against the imperialist war. After that, Zetkin continued her work outside the Second International. At the time of the founding of the SPD Women's Bureau in 1891, women in Prussia were legally barred from attending political meetings or joining political parties. Finally, in 1902, as Bebel noted, quote, "The Prussian Secretary of State condescended to give women permission to attend the meetings of political clubs, but under the condition that they had to take their seats in a part of the hall specially set aside for them." End quote. The achievements of the Women's Bureau, viewed in this context, were substantial. Its publication, Gleichheit, Equality, reached a circulation of 23,000 by 1905 and 112,000 by 1913. Meanwhile, female membership in the party grew from roughly 4,000 women in the party to 1905 to 141,000 by 1913. The German working women's movement soon became the epicenter of an international movement of socialist women under the rubric of the Second International, with organizing women's workers into trade unions its priority. In 1907, Zetkin organized the first International Congress of Socialist Women in Stuttgart, held in the days leading up to the Second International's full Congress. At that Congress, the Second International voted for universal suffrage for all women and men. The issue of whether to fight for universal or partial women's suffrage was a point of strong controversy. Some women's suffrage organizations demanded, and in some European countries won, partial suffrage for women, with voting rights based upon property holding and the payment of taxes, i.e., restricting voting rights to those women of financial means. But in many of these same societies, male suffrage was also partial, denying working-class men the right to vote. Thus, partial suffrage merely increased the voting power of the upper classes. Leading women of the Second International, including Zetkin, Luxemburg, Kollontai, and Eleanor Marx, clearly distinguished the socialist demand for women's suffrage from that of, quote, middle-class women. They championed universal suffrage in the context of class struggle. In a position paper in preparation for the 1907 Stuttgart Women's Conference, Zetkin argued for the right for all women, regardless of class. Beginning of long quote. But when we demand women's suffrage, we can only do so on the ground, not that it should be a right attached to the possession of a certain amount of property, but that it should be inherent in the woman herself. From this point of view of history, we demand the political equality of women and the right to vote as a recognition of the political rights due to our sex. This is a question which applies to the whole of women without exception. All women, whatever be their position, should demand political equality as a means of a freer life, and one calculated to yield rich blessings to society. Besides, in the women's world, as well as in the men's world, there exists the class law and the class struggle, and it appears as fully established that sometimes between the socialist working women and those belonging to the middle class, there may be antagonisms. This middle class should agitate for the suffrage, not only in their own interests, in order to weaken the power of the male sex, but they should also labor in the cause of the whole of social reform, and give what help they can in that matter. But while we are ready as socialists to use all our political might to bring about this change, yet we are bound to notice the difference between us and them. End of section.